Well, that was a long 10 days, wasn't it? Pluribus has finally returned after releasing episode 5 earlier than planned last week, and with the biggest cliffhanger the show gave us being what it decided to leave us with. In episode 6, we got to see just what the others were keeping inside of the refrigerated warehouse. And do you know what? Some of us were right. For me, this episode was about a couple of key things: the polar opposite experiences, individuality versus peace on Earth, and the grounding and centralizing of thoughts, which was summed up most with the visuals and the framing of the shots, as there were so many moments where the subject or the focal point was center of the frame. Completely different to how the show usually looks, by the way, and with it being Vince Gilligan, there's symbolism in there for sure. So with that, let's dive into this week's episode, which was titled HDP, Human-Derived Protein, and discuss all that there was to take away from it. Here is Pluribus Episode 6, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. When the episode first opened up, we had a shot from outside the factory that Carol was inside of, and like the previous episode, with the beeping of the heart rate monitor to make us aware that Zosia was alive but in a critical condition, and the instant establishing of the environment being a hospital. This episode started with sound as well, and it wanted our hearing to be the first sense that was teased. We heard the sound of insects, such as crickets chirping away in the background. This sound established two things. It provided a sense of calm and allowed the contrast to land perfectly when Carol stormed out of the warehouse, but it also leaned into one of the core themes of the episode, which was loneliness. This was the episode where we truly saw just how alone Carol was, and with the crickets being something that we could hear, which highlighted that there was nobody else around her. It hinted at the fact that this was the episode where it was going to rise to the surface. The way that the camera was positioned, capturing two corners of the building and showing that there was nothing there, also supported that too. Carol was on her own there, individuality was gone, but also the others had left too. However, what I will say is there's dark comedy embedded there too, because, as we know, technically she wasn't the only human on site. As soon as Carol came out of the door, we saw her initial response to what was inside of the refrigerator, and it was accompanied by abrupt music which altered the tone drastically. Carol was throwing up, and all it did was build more intrigue because we'd not only waited 10 days to see what was under the sheet, but we then found ourselves there waiting again, just plonked in the corner watching on and scratching our heads. With Carol pulling out the video camera, she planned on filming what she found and sending it to the other survivors that she'd reached out to, and it was here where we got to see it through the perspective of the camera, and it allowed us to feel like we were quite literally in Carol's shoes and the other survivors watching it firsthand, rather than simply just being in the room with her, so it added a nice sense of immersion. When the camera was moving towards the sheet, there was a pulsating drone sound which allowed tension to build, and it almost felt like it was mimicking a heartbeat. It was counting down to the reveal, which felt all the more applicable, seeing how long we'd actually waited, but it also reminded me of how Manousos had his timer that he utilized as well. Countdowns and timers have been at the heart of this show, so it was a subtle way of reinforcing that. Under the sheet, we saw that there were body parts that had all been separated, and there was a meat grinder at the back of the warehouse which was grinding up the parts and enabling it to be put in the milk carton. This then established the dark tone of the episode, and for the first time it showed us that maybe the others were worth fearing. Even though they said that they couldn't bring harm to a living creature, the dismembering of the parts and the eventual consumption of them was extremely strange and unsettling. As we later found out, these were the people that had fallen victim to the joining, and with over 100,000 people dying a day of natural causes around the planet, HDP, human-derived protein, was something that they had in their diet and also needed. This is because they basically couldn't farm and would be killed off in 10 years if they didn't have it. Carol didn't know this until later on in the episode when she went to Vegas, so the threat level for her was increased significantly during the opening part of the episode. Carol wanted to inform the rest of the survivors, but she didn't trust the others to translate the video footage because she didn't want them to know that she was onto them even more. That's why she took it upon herself to pack her bag and drive to Vegas to speak with Koumba. However, before she left, she hoovered up the rug which had the substance on it. It was a strange thing to do because she'd already left the house, but I'm guessing it's because if the others decided to pay her home a visit and saw that she was onto them, it might make them react strangely again. As the last time she pushed them for answers and found out that there was a reversal process and also that they couldn't lie, it caused them to flee the town. So in this instance, she wanted to at least think that she was one step ahead. This was where a lot of things in the frame were centered, and in my mind it made me think that everything was now aligned in Carol's head, and she had a centralized thought process on what she wanted to do for the first time in the show. There was now a clear plan of action that she wanted to carry out. I also want to touch on the transitions that were present during the opening scene. When she was packing her bag and walking through the house, it was just seamless, smooth, glossy, and still. When the camera followed her through the hallway and then opened up inside of her bag when she unzipped it, it was a thing of beauty, and it leaned into just how well thought out many of the shots are in the show. Las Vegas. The first thing we saw in Vegas was a photo of Elvis on the wall and a waitress speaking in French. This was a slow reveal to Koumba and all that he'd been up to. Having it slowly going around the room, seeing the others acting in a certain way, hearing them speak in French because that was his native language, and us not being introduced to him right away was a nice way of teasing us that it was going to be him. He was playing poker for the house record, and what we were watching was the most inconsequential highest stake game ever. This was all about showing us the different responses to the situation that was going on in the world. We had Carol, who was struggling, had just stumbled across bodies and was losing her mind. Manousos, who was essentially a prisoner because he was so scared about what was going on. And then on a different side of the United States to Carol, we had Koumba playing a fake game of poker, making a mockery of the situation that the world was in and expressing how it was all just a game. It was interesting to see because it showed how different the responses could truly be amongst a small pool of subjects. Koumba had actually given roles to the others, and there was a piece of dialogue that the enemy said, which was, "Your luck is about to run out," and Koumba responded and said, "Maybe someday, but not today." With everything that we see in this show having some level of importance, it instantly made me question if it's foreshadowing the fact that something bad was going to come Koumba's way. He's almost been taking advantage of the situation and doesn't want the world to return to the way that it was, using the people there as pawns and not having an ounce of respect for the bodies that these people represent. So I wonder if something is going to come back to get him, and this was the show teasing it for the first time. Once Koumba had what he wanted out of the situation, we saw the others switch out of character instantly, and the contrast was insane. There was no more conversation, the facial expressions were either completely blank or they had a smile, and they were back to operating as one, not speaking to each other simply because they didn't need to. When Koumba was there, we felt like he was in a room full of people. There was noise, laughter, and individuality. But once he left, that alien and numbness that was present within the others was brought right back to the surface and reminded us of the haunting reality of it all. Carol was on her way to Vegas to speak with Koumba, and the others froze when Carol was near, showing that they still wanted their space from her due to the way that she'd been acting. A lot of shots around here were centered as well, such as the jacuzzi and also the Las Vegas road. The wide shots from up high captured the emptiness on what is usually such a busy road, and the sound of crickets re-entered the soundscape of the scene. Something which would never ordinarily be heard when on that road because of the traffic and the conversation, so it pitted that emptiness at the forefront of our subconscious. I actually thought that it was quite funny that Carol just trusted her gut that Koumba would be there because she didn't want the others to know that she was going to be headed there. Here again we had another shot where the main subject was centered, and that was as Carol got out of the elevator. She planned on telling Koumba and showing him what was inside of their Agrijet warehouse, but he was already aware of it. In the context of the show, with 100,000 people dying a day, with them not being able to harm a living thing at all, such as a plant, which meant that they couldn't harvest wheat, corn, rice, or even pluck an apple from a tree, only taking the ones that fall. The humans that were dying every day were essentially the apples that were falling off the trees that they were taking advantage of. Carol initially denied a drink from Koumba when she went into the suite, but after watching the John Cena video, she turned back to the bottle to drown her sorrows at the fact that Koumba already knew, and he was still happily playing in the world like it was his own personal playground. She wanted to make a difference, but nobody was singing from her hymn sheet. In this scene, this was where one of the core themes of the episode came to light, and this was the true loneliness that Carol had been feeling since the world turned upside down and since she lost the love of her life, Helen. She's been riding on adrenaline, and you could almost tell that talking to Koumba in that brief moment brought her something. He was human, an individual, so there was a realness to it. I feel like that was also brought to the forefront when she fell asleep with the glass in her hand and he took the glass away and put her under a blanket. He didn't need to do that, and he didn't have it ingrained within him to do it like the others do, so for a brief moment in the episode there was an actual sense of true humanity. whilst also showing that even somebody like Koumba, who quite literally acts like a pig, can have an ounce of goodness within him, something very human. This was where Carol found out that Koumba was in communication with all of the other survivors except for Manousos, and they were part of a group that met with each other on Tuesdays and Fridays. There was a sense of upset in Carol, and it almost brought to light that even in a world where there were only a few select people that had their own individuality, they didn't want Carol to be there because of the way that she acted. Carol was asking them what they spoke about and how often they met with each other, showing that she was interested and felt left out. When Carol was on her own, she went to the bathroom and she almost cried about the situation. Almost crying is important in this because we still haven't seen her shed a tear despite so many bad things happening to her, such as losing the love of her life. Instead, she simply just puts on a brave face, cracks on, and keeps herself to herself. Her being alone in that bathroom and almost crying was the reality hitting her that she was now truly alone. She didn't have Helen to confide in nor anybody else to speak to at all because they didn't want her there, not even the others. During the next day, Carol was eating breakfast and Koumba mirrored the way that she was assembling the food that she was eating. With the both of them ordinarily eating breakfast completely differently, it again just reinforced that message which is focused on individuality, the very thing that the others want to take away. He didn't mind the way that she ate it, but you could tell that he definitely preferred eating his way. With Carol being upset the previous evening about feeling alone, she mentioned to Koumba about maybe getting a suite in the hotel, and Koumba just fell completely silent. With that reaction, Carol then made out like she was joking, but I really don't think she was. I think she liked the idea of being near somebody that was similar to her and wasn't a part of the joining, but that was too close for Koumba. Again, showing that greediness and selfishness that he has within him. What ordinarily wouldn't be a problem, sharing an entire hotel between two people, was something that he didn't want to happen. But then, once Carol said that she was joking, he returned back to his usual self. The main message of this show and the purpose of the joining, peace on Earth and a thriving planet at the cost of individuality, was front and center when Carol was about to leave, as she said to Koumba, "Do you seriously think the world is a better place?" I like this question a lot because technically the planet is thriving more, but the world isn't a better place from a human point of view because everything and everybody we know, love and care about no longer exists. It's a question that I think as an audience member I sit on different sides of the fence every single week, and the more I think about it, my brain hurts because there's no right answer. I'd want individuality, but then does that make me selfish if the planet then suffers? It's just so thought-provoking. During this scene as well, we also got probably the largest reveal of the entire season, and that was that Carol can't become a part of the joining unless she gives her consent to the others. This is because in order to do so, it means that Carol would have to be put through a lot of pain. And what's the other's main thing? To make sure that Carol's happy. In order for the existing survivors to become a part of the hive mind, they need to tailor it to their individual stem cells that they'd need to collect from their body. In order to do so, a large needle would go into the bone of the hip, which would be painful. So with Carol finding out that information, she told them that she'd never give them their consent to do that. Koumba actually said that the others weren't happy about it, so it makes me think that they're going to search for another way to be able to make them join. But what this does for Carol is it takes the pressure off them going after her, and it might well buy her some more time to be able to work out how the reversal could occur. When Carol called the others to tell them that, having to hear that voicemail again on 2 different occasions before any words could be spoken, it got across that level of frustration that I had last week and the impatience that Carol was feeling that we saw with her tapping her feet and just wanting to speak with them. Koumba was relatively carefree when we first met him in episode 2, but by finding out the revelation that the others couldn't recruit them if they didn't give their consent, it makes a bit more sense as to why he had even more of a carefree attitude. 9 days, 18 hours, and 16 minutes. So the end of this episode actually took us back in time by 3 days, and it took us right back to Paraguay to see the situation that Manousos was dealing with. He appeared in the exact same fashion as what he did when we were first introduced to him. He was working through the radio signals to see if there was anybody on the other end, and he'd finally made it to the end and completed his book with nobody truly responding. I like the way that we were introduced to him in the exact same way because it showed just how entrapped he was, and that unlike Koumba, who was doing whatever he wanted, wherever he wanted, Manousos hadn't left since we last saw him. The ticking of the timer as he was waiting for somebody to respond with the wide shot really captured the essence of emptiness that was there, and it was almost like the crickets of this room. Even though Manousos was unsuccessful with finding anybody on the other end, Channel 8163.0 brought some level of confusion as it almost sounded like there was this beat that was cutting through underneath the static that was present. Was it music that was playing? Was it machinery? It's difficult to tell, but I think it's definitely going to be of importance when Manousos eventually meets Carol. He still wasn't eating properly and was disregarding the food that the others were bringing him because he still didn't trust them. This was also shown to us with the way that he still walked outside with the crowbar for protection. This time though, the others brought him the videotape that was transcribed of Carol speaking about the fact that there was a way of reversing the joining. When Carol said that there were 12 other people, we heard Manousos speak for the first time other than on the phone to Carol, and he was shocked. It made him feel like he wasn't alone in the world for the first time in 9 days. For a while, we've known that Manousos was more on the side of Carol when compared to the others or Koumba, and with him packing a bag, taking her address off the label of the envelope, he's now going to head towards her with the hopes of getting some kind of answers about what's going on. So far, all he's learned about them is from the videotape that she sent, so now he has that element of trust within him towards her. The inspiring music that was playing as he was walking out of the storage unit facility with the voice of Carol's video speaking over the top was quite an empowering moment, especially with Carol saying, "You treasure your individuality," connecting right back to the entire debate that's at the heart of the show. When Manousos left the gate, I thought it was a nice touch that the camera stayed on the other side of the fence, the very place where he'd felt imprisoned for the past 9 days. It pretty much highlighted to us that he was now free and had broken out of the cage. The fact that he locked up the facility was a nice touch as it connected back to the caring type of person that we perceived him to be. Like when Carol was at the center of the frame on many different occasions of the episode, showing that she had a clear line of thought now, the same was present for Manousos. He was centrally framed in the street, the abandoned, empty street that had a sinister and haunting edge to it as all of the lights gradually switched on one by one. However, then when he went into his apartment, that changed, and the shots then altered to the ones that we saw a lot with Carol, with it being around the corner, almost adding that sense of tension and intrigue because we can see what he can't, and even though we can see what's around the corner, it feels like something's on the way, so it provides a sense of uncomfort. There was an importance placed on his crucifix that was on the wall in the distance, so it showed us that religion was important to him, something that doesn't seem to be for Carol, so I wonder if their difference in beliefs might eventually cause them to clash at some points. With him taking a wad of cash, maps that take him through South America, it seems like he's going to drive as far as he can along the Pan American Highway with the hopes of eventually driving to Albuquerque so he can work with Carol. With the types of supplies that Manousos had, such as weapons, food, money, and maps, it leaned into the fact that this was no different to a zombie apocalypse, and for the first time in the show, we saw it being treated like that. Manousos is the character that's acting in a way that I feel like many people actually would, being led by fear and not truly knowing what was going on. When he saw his mother standing across the street, which was being controlled by the others, this was such a haunting shot. The darkness of the night was showing her as a silhouette rather than having her lit, and it just added to the eerie backdrop and highlighted the mindset and first impressions that Manousos had of the whole situation. His mother was being kind to him, and he knew that it wasn't truly her because his mother was horrible to him, and with the others only wanting to make people happy. That goes against the core character trait of his mother. Manousos essentially served as the complete opposite to Koumba in this episode, and with Carol being the loneliest that she's been, with Manousos headed her way, we might just see that loneliness come to an end and Carol find solace and comfort in somebody for the first time in the entirety of the show. My review of the episode. I thought this was a really good episode of the show. After the previous episode being a really intimate one with it literally just being Carol that got the key focus and the majority of the screen time, it was nice to see her interacting with other characters. I'm actually glad that Koumba came back because he provided some strong comic relief in episode 2, and he did the exact same in this one. He really just doesn't care, and it makes me laugh so much. He's just living out the complete extreme version of events that somebody in that situation would do. I thought the performance of Carol was really strong in this episode, from being completely riddled with panic and fear in the first third, to then having that loneliness absorb her in the second, to there then being a sense of optimism in the final third. The range that Rhea Seehorn had to deliver in this episode was far and wide, and she didn't fall short of the perfect performance on any occasion. I'd even say that maybe this was the episode where she became a bit more likable. Seeing her suppress her emotions made me feel so bad for her, and that loneliness that she had hit me in the gut. I could empathize with her, not because I'm constantly lonely like her, but on occasions in life I think we've all felt a little helpless and lonely, so it was really felt through the screen. I can already tell that Manousos is probably going to become my favorite character in the show. He's the one that just seems to be polite and embody the goodness that comes with human characteristics and individuality. He's the opposite to Carol in the sense that he seems calm, composed, and is an extremely prepared individual, so I'm excited to see what's going to happen when the both of them team up. Like I said earlier on in the video, the shots in this episode had the subjects and the focal points right in the center of the frame on many occasions, something that I feel got across the message that Carol's mind was a bit more focused and centralized, and the same for Manousos. They were about to act in a slightly different way to what they were before because there was now clarity and they had a clear sense of direction, so I feel like that was why the shots were like that. The opening scene, as with every episode in this show, was of top quality, and this was definitely one to remember. Not only was it harrowing seeing those parts that she found, but the immersion of it by seeing it through the camera. It was a modern horror approach from 2000 horror movies, and it made the situation even more frightening. Timing that reveal with the extra long wait that we had for the episode to release was pure perfection from Vince Gilligan. I was sitting there thinking about it all week and wondering what was underneath the sheet. I don't know if that was by chance or if it was deliberate, but I clapped my hands because I feel like it took up a lot of headspace for many of us. I say this every week, but this is the best show that's on TV right now. It's the most thought-provoking one, and I know that there's It Welcome to Derry that's out at the moment, which is also strong, but Pluribus is completely original, and I've got to respect the originality of a show that's just so good and not based on any previous work. This show is a success because of the quality that it has at its core that flows through every touch point of it. Whether that's the writing, the cinematography, the performances, the score, or the deeper theme of the subject matter. I'm already gutted that we've only got 3 episodes left, so I'm hoping this is going to be a long 3 weeks. So, there you have it, Pluribus Episode 6 Ending Explained. If you want to see every episode of Pluribus being broken down, then check the playlist below. I'm covering the show every week, so be sure to subscribe to the channel. What did you think of this episode? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.